Hi, I'm Miss Penn, and I want to tell you a story today about two photographs. This is the first one. This is a family photo of mine from 18 years ago this Wednesday. And I know it was exactly this Wednesday because this picture was taken on 9/11. Now, I didn't plan it that way, of course. 9/11 just happened. And we had this appointment, and the photo was taken. It's sort of difficult to look at this photo now because that day was scary and surreal and in most ways indescribable. But now I have this photographic record of my face on that day, and I find it hard to look at without remembering all of the terrible things about that tragedy. Now, I didn't bring you here to tell you a tragic tale. You guys weren't alive during 9/11, but I am sure you've read about it, heard about it plenty, all of the bad things. But I want to tell you a different story associated with 9/11 today. One of kindness and hope and compassion and greatness of heart and humanity. The other picture is my connection to this story, and I am bragging just a little bit on my friend. So this is my wedding photo, and just to the side of me here, you will see my friend Jen Colella. Now, Jen is an actress in New York who happens to be starring in a musical called Come From Away. She was even nominated for a Tony Award for that performance. She plays Beverly Bass, who was one of the first female airline pilot hired by American Airlines in 1976. And she also happens to be a pilot who was in the air on 9/11. There were lots of planes in the air that day that could not land in the U.S. They were diverted to a place called Gander, Newfoundland. And it's a tiny little town where 7,000 strangers arrived and needed food and shelter and comfort. And this tiny little town brought these people into their homes and took care of them until they could come home. The musical Come From Away was derived from their personal stories and written by two writers who felt like these stories should be told. Because that day brought out the worst in humanity and the best. And sometimes we forget to tell the stories that turned out the best. So here's a little documentary that I cut down to fit into advisory about the people of Gander and how they made it to Broadway.
On a clear blue September morning, steel straight lines broke and crumbled, changing the world.
Apparently, a small passenger plane has crashed into one of the World Trade Towers.
As we turned and banked over Long Island, I was looking out the window, and that's when the second plane hit. So there was a puff of smoke on the horizon.
Minutes after the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, U.S. airspace shut down. Hundreds of planes in the air above the Atlantic Ocean were ordered to backtrack to Europe or land at Canadian airports. 38 jets turned towards what used to be the world's largest runway. Those jets held 7,000 passengers. Gander's population was about to double. With a proud military tradition and a history of stepping up, Gander was more ready than most towns would be.
Our plane was scheduled to land at JFK at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's where we were diverted from. So as we were approaching JFK over Long Island, the first plane hit the World Trade Center towers, and between the first and second planes is when our captain was given the information to turn and head north to Gander. So as we approached Gander, I remember looking out the window and seeing 7 other airplanes already parked on the runway, and we, like a Evel Knievel daredevil rider, we skimmed over the top of those airplanes and landed on the other side of them.
Welcome to unexpected visit to Canada. We're in Gander, just informed of a horrible tragedy in Washington and New York City, and thank God we're not a part of it. We're safe here, but anyway, every single plane over the ocean is being diverted here, I think. So we're not sure where we're going to go or how long we're going to be here.
We had received a report through our communication lines that what would appear to be maybe a terrorist activity or hijacking has occurred.
On the ground for 8 hours and on the plane for, I don't know, 15 hours? I don't know. Don't even know. Anyway, we're getting ready to get off soon.
I learned when we got off the airplane, these yellow school buses that were there to shuttle us around, the driver told us they were actually on strike. And they had come off the strike in order to help people. And I'll never forget, clear as day, we got off the plane, it was this beautiful blue sky, completely warm. The first thing that happened was somebody came to me with like a little box of food and a toothbrush. And there was a complete stranger who just walked up to me and said, "Here."
While the bomb squad was examining the planes full of passengers, the people of Gander and surrounding towns got busy, setting up cots, gathering bedding, and cooking for thousands.
Everybody had to be processed by the Red Cross, and this is where they had tables set up with all the food and everything for all the passengers when we got off the plane. And that's what was so amazing to us is, we'd been on the airplane all night and we get off, and I was just shocked at the amount of food they had cooked overnight. They obviously did not sleep 1 minute. My children were 8 and 9, and actually it was a very hard day for my husband because there was such an unknown for him. All they knew is that I was flying, my husband and my kids, but they didn't know where I was. And they spent the whole day not knowing where I was because even though they tried to call American, you weren't going to be able to get through. And American had a huge domestic operation to deal with, not to mention the fact that we had lost 2 airplanes. I knew where I was. I knew I was okay. I knew I was on the ground in Gander, but my family did not know. So it was much more challenging for them. And in the beginning of the musical, when Jen picks up the phone and says, "I'm fine, Tom," it's still very hard for him.
No, I'm fine, Tom. I'm fine. For the 7,000 passengers who were finally out of their planes and on the ground, relief was soon mixed with shock.
Incredible.
How many are you making breakfast for?
Approximately 300.
Today?
Yes, that's right.
Atlantic and Gander, and they've been wonderful people here to host us, and tons of volunteers, and just amazing.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. People of Gander have been absolutely marvellous. For what they've done here, they deserve a medal. They've been so generous. I can't thank them enough. It's the same, everybody feels the same down here as well. Everybody off the plane have been so grateful. They're absolutely great, you are, really lovely people. I just hope we could do the same if it ever happened in our country. I'm so proud. You ought to be so proud of everybody here. We're so thankful.
It's been brilliant. Everyone seems to have pulled together, you know. It's amazing where all the stuff has come from, because it doesn't seem really a large town, but everybody in the whole town has pulled together, and we're chuffed to bits, so we really are proud. We'll always have Gander in our hearts anyway.
I have to say a great thank you to everybody in this village, to the staff, to the teachers, to the youth, to the families, and they are so helpful. They are full of friendship to us, and they support us, and they smile, and they cook by themselves, and it's great. And that's more than any master plan could have developed. It's just from man to man, and this is great, and thank you to everybody.
Central Newfoundlanders invited the Plain people into their homes to make phone calls or to take showers and to stay for dinner. Rock-solid friendships were soon formed.
1,000 miles away from home, we should be plumb insane. But our plates are never empty. Lord, they're feeding us again. 1,000 miles away from home, we're waiting for a plane.
I'm sure I can say this for everybody. With something that the stuff that's on television there, being the worst of what we're capable of, and then coming here and seeing the best of what we're capable of in this place is just so amazing.
After a week, with a hurricane headed for the island and a concern that some of the jumbo jets were sinking into the tarmac, airlines were finally given clearance to fly.
It's been quite an adventure. I have never, ever met anybody as nice as the people in Gander. It is unbelievable. I'm serious. Never have I met people as wonderful, as helpful. There's not one person that we have come across who hasn't offered to help us in some way. It's overwhelming.
We've had very, very good people taking care of us. They've been wonderful. They treated us just like we were home. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. It brought tears to our eyes to leave, but they've been great. They've been really great to us, and this is something that you will never forget. You'll always remember, the people here. They were wonderful, just wonderful, outstanding.
7,000 Plain people, now considered friends, went home and the Central Newfoundlanders got some rest. The ripple effect was just getting started. Many towns and cities in Canada were recognized for their hospitality during the dark days of 9/11, but only Gander and Appleton were given steel from the World Trade Center site. Over the years, the friendships formed in Central Newfoundland have strengthened, and by the 10th anniversary, the realization had taken hold that what happened here was truly remarkable. The Newfoundland hosts wouldn't accept money for their hospitality back in 2001, but grateful passengers mailed gifts and donations. New computer labs were funded in schools.
So as your name is called, if you would step forward, please, to receive your award.
And in Lewisport, students are still receiving scholarships from a hat passed on Delta Flight 15 when passengers were on their way home. Behind the scenes at the 10th anniversary, two writers were taking notes. Michael Rubinoff of Toronto's Sheridan College sent Irene Sankoff and David Hine to Gander, hoping they'd experience the hospitality firsthand and want to write a musical.
Not many people shared that vision to turn this into a musical. They didn't think this could possibly work. After a 3-hour dinner, that's where I said to them at the end, I said, try to find people to do a musical about the events in Gander, Newfoundland, and the surrounding towns on 9/11. And that's where it happened.
No one would have guessed how far that 10th anniversary trip would take writers Irene Sankoff and David Hine.
When we first came here, the town was filled with press, and they were all looking for sort of a 5-second soundbite. And what we were looking for, we didn't know what we were looking for,
but we just talked.
We ended up talking to people for 3 or 4 hours, and it was those conversations that inspired us, and every minute of those conversations was a new story that we wanted to tell, and that we wanted to share, that made us laugh, that made us cry, that inspired us to be better people. And we just couldn't wait to get back home. When other people saw a 9/11 musical, we saw a story about community, and we saw a 9/12 story about the way this, a smaller community responded to a larger event. And coming out here has just, it's changed our lives, but it inspired us. That's why we made this.
Their biggest challenge was convincing the Newfoundlanders that they did something worth writing about.
I don't know if they thought we were slightly touched and were just being nice to us or what, but they just very nicely were like, all right, what else do you want to know? You want another cup of tea? Okay. Oh, and then there's this one guy. And we just were like, that's great. More tea, more stories.
David and Irene turned those stories into a script, and the musical Come From Away was first performed by Sheridan College students.
The Canadian Music Theatre Project was created, and I'm so proud that our students first gave life to these characters, and from that, we're now going to Broadway.
But before Broadway, the producers brought the entire cast and crew to meet the real people they're playing on stage.
Oh, there's already a cat. Oh my God, Bobby! Yes! How are you? How exciting is this? I hope I don't embarrass you tomorrow. That's all I hope. Right? You can tell me afterwards if you're not happy about it.
In Come From Away, Newfoundlander Patrina Bromley plays SPCA manager Bonnie Harris. She crawled over luggage into the holds of jumbo jets to look for and care for dogs, cats, and a pair of rare chimpanzees.
We always take dramatic liberty, right? Like, I've done shows before, Oil and Water, obviously. Violet Pike was a real person. She's passed away, so I didn't get to meet her, but her family came to see it. And I've played Joan Morrissey, and Joan's family came to see it. And so you hope that you get that at least stamp of approval, but to have the actual person there is going to be a bit different.
Something incredibly special. I'll never forget tonight. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you today? Good.
The first time we saw each other, we were like, oh my gosh.
It's true. She hadn't even seen the show yet. It was in La Jolla, and she and Tom had flown in after the show had come down, and so there's a restaurant right across the street, and I walked in, and we kind of locked eyes, and she crossed the room and came over to me and said, I think you're playing me. And I said, I think you're right.
American Airlines had the prettiest planes, so I applied as a flight engineer. But the World War II pilots, they all complained. They said girls shouldn't be in the cockpit.
Jen Colella never fails to get wild applause for her song about Captain Beverly Bass. As American Airlines' first female captain, Bev landed a packed jumbo jet in Gander on 9/11.
You're getting a point of view from someone who was in a leadership position and taking care of a lot of folks and having to hold it together in a time that was so uncertain. I want so many people to see this now that we have the energy and the power and the blessing from these Ganderites.
You're in the center row on the floor.
We see this as our opening night. Broadway, that'll take care of itself.
In the show's finale, I'm an Islander, the characters sing, if you're hoping for a harbor, you'll find an open door. In Newfoundland and Labrador, that's a given. Funny that it took some come-from-aways to let us know how special that is.
5 days.